Have you ever survived something that was supposed to break you, and then walked out the front door to find out the world didn't even notice you were gone? That's what it felt like. I stood outside Mercy General on a Tuesday morning in November, wearing the same clothes I'd checked in with 6 weeks earlier. A blue flannel shirt, dark jeans, boot that had scuffed worse than I remembered. I had a plastic bag with a toothbrush, a razor, a paperback I never finished, and my wallet with $68 in it. The air smelled like cold pavement and someone's cigarette from across the parking lot. I just stood there for a minute, breathing it in. My son was supposed to be there at 10. It was 10:47. I told myself traffic. I told myself he got the time mixed up. I told myself a lot of things while I watched other people get picked up. A woman with a balloon bouquet. An older man who got hugged so hard by his daughter that he nearly fell over. I watched a nurse walk past me twice without making eye contact. At 11:15, I called my son's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His voice on the recording sounded young to me still. It always did. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what I would have said. I sat down on a concrete bench near the entrance and put the plastic bag between my feet. The wind picked up. I hadn't eaten since 6 that morning, and the $68 suddenly felt like it needed to be carefully managed. I thought about calling a cab, but I didn't actually know what I was going home to. I hadn't been inside that house in 43 days. They'd admitted me from the ER, not from home, and somewhere in the back of my mind I'd been avoiding thinking about what that meant. My name is Hank. I'm 61 years old. I was a high school history teacher for 22 years. I coached JV basketball for 11 of those years. I have 2 grandchildren I've never held at the same time. I have a son named, well, I'll get to that. And 14 months before that Tuesday morning, my wife of 34 years died from a brain aneurysm on a Wednesday afternoon while I was grading papers in the next room. Her name was June. She made coffee too strong and laughed at her own jugs before she finished telling them. And she was the only person who ever made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. She was 60 years old. She had plans. We had plans. None of them included what came next. I won't make this about the grief because you already know what grief looks like. You've either lived it or you're going to. What I'll say is that I stopped eating regular meals. I stopped sleeping at normal hours. I stopped going into work because I couldn't stand in front of 26 kids and talk about causes and consequences when I couldn't explain my own life to myself anymore. I took a leave of absence. Then I extended it. Then I didn't go back, and somewhere in those 14 months, bourbon became the thing that got me from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. without lying there staring at the ceiling thinking about how quiet the house was. I knew what it was. I'm not stupid. I taught teenagers about the French Revolution and the Dust Bowl and the long-term consequences of short-term decisions. I knew exactly what I was doing. I did it anyway. It took a fall down the back porch steps and a neighbor finding me at midnight to get me to the ER, and from the ER, after some conversations I only half remember, to the hospital's inpatient recovery program for 43 days. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I mean that without any drama. Just hard. Every single day. So when I walked out those front doors on a Tuesday morning in November, I had earned that moment. I had worked for it. I had sat in circles and said things out loud I'd never said to anyone, and I had made a decision. A real one, not a promise, but a decision. To be different. And my son didn't come. I called again at noon. Voicemail again. I called my daughter-in-law. She answered on the second ring. Hank. Her voice had that particular flatness to it that I'd learned to recognize over the years. Not angry, not warm. Just measured, like she'd already decided how the conversation was going to go. Hey, I said, I'm still at the hospital. I was supposed to be picked up at 10. Is everything okay with your husband? Pause. He's been really overwhelmed lately, she said. Work stuff. I think he just lost track. I looked out at the parking lot. A pigeon was walking in circles near a drain. Okay, I said. Can you remind him? Or is there any chance someone could come get me? I don't have a car here. Another pause. Longer this time. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of something right now, Hank. Can you get an Uber? I was 61 years old. I had $68. I had just spent 43 days learning how to ask for help. And here I was asking for help. And the answer was, "Can you get an Uber?" "Sure," I said. "No problem." I hung up. I sat on that bench for another few minutes, not crying, not angry yet, just sitting with it, the way the counselors had taught me to do. Sit with the feeling. Name it. Don't run from it. I named it. I didn't run from it. I named it. I didn't run from it. It was still there. Then I picked up my plastic bag and walked toward the far end of the parking lot to check what Uber would cost me. That's when someone said my name. "Coach Hank." I turned around. There was a man standing next to a grey SUV about 30 feet away. Late 30s, maybe 40. Dark jacket, broad shoulders, dark hair going a little grey at the temples. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately read. I didn't recognize him. "I'm sorry," I said. It's Darnell," he said. "It's Darnell," he said. He took a few steps toward me. "Darnell Okafor. I played point guard for you. 2004, 2005. You probably don't, Darnell." I did remember then. Not immediately, but when he said it, the memory came back clean and clear. A skinny kid who could barely do a layup when I first got him and who by his senior year had the best core vision I'd ever coached at that level. Quiet, serious, the kind of kid who stayed after practice to ask questions. "I remember you." He smiled. It changed his whole face. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I work here," he said. "I'm an orthopedic surgeon. Have been for about 6 years now." He glanced at the bag in my hand, then back at my face, and I could see him being careful. "I saw you sitting out here. I almost didn't come over because I didn't want to. I don't know." Intrude, but you've been sitting there for a while. I didn't know what to say to that. "My ride didn't come," I said. It felt ridiculous saying out loud. He nodded once, not with pity, just acknowledgement. "I know what this place is," he said quietly. "The unit you came from. I know what it takes to walk out of there." He paused. "Do you have somewhere to be?" "My house," I said. "About 40 minutes from here if there's no traffic. I'll take you." "Darnell, you don't have to, coach." He said it the way he used to say it when I tried to dismiss what he was saying in practice. Calm, firm, not moving. "I have 45 minutes before my next surgery. Let me take you." I got in the car. We didn't talk much on the way. He asked if I'd eaten. I said not really. He pulled through a drive-thru without making a big deal of it. I ate a breakfast sandwich in the passenger seat of a surgeon's SUV and watched the highway slide past and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happy. Not fixed. Just not alone. When he pulled into my driveway, he put the car in park and was quiet for a second. "Your lawn needs work," he said. I looked. He wasn't wrong. "Yeah," I said. "Coach Hank." He turned to look at me. "I don't know your full situation, and I'm not going to pretend I do, but I want you to know something." He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a business card, held it out. "My cell's on there. If you need anything, I mean that, not as a doctor, just as someone who owes you a lot." I took the card. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "That's not true." He shook his head slowly. "You probably don't remember this, but in the spring of my junior year, I was about to quit school. My mum was sick, money was bad. I had an older cousin telling me to come work with him. I was going to do it." He paused. "You kept me after practice one day. You told me you'd seen a lot of kids with talent, and a lot of kids with work ethic, but almost none with both. And then you helped me apply for a scholarship I didn't know existed. You drove me to the interview." I remembered the scholarship. I didn't remember the conversation. "You're a surgeon," I said. "Yeah," he said. "I'm a surgeon." He smiled again. "So use the number." I went inside. The house was exactly the same and completely different. Dust on the bookshelves. June's reading glasses still on the side table. Mail piled up by the door. Mostly bills, mostly forwarded from somewhere. I stood in the front hallway for a long time before I sat down on the stairs and just let the silence be what it was. My son called at 3:30 that afternoon. "Hey, Dad." He sounded distracted. I could hear something in the background, some kind of TV or music. "Sorry about this morning. I got my wires crossed. You get home okay?" "I got a ride," I said. Good. A pause. "Listen, there's some stuff we should probably talk about at some point. About the house. About Mum's accounts. Just whenever you're ready." I didn't say anything for a second. "What kind of stuff?" I said. "Just logistics. Nothing urgent. My wife has been helping me sort through some things while you were away, and there are a few decisions that need to be made." Something moved in the back of my chest. Not quite alarm. Not yet. But something. "What decisions?" I said. "Like I said, nothing urgent. Let's do it in person. How's next week?" "Sure," I said. "Next week." I hung up and sat with that feeling too. His name is Caleb. He's 34 years old. He works in commercial real estate. I love my son. I want to be clear about that because everything that comes after needs to have that underneath it. I love him. I also knew, even then, sitting on those stairs in a house that smelled like dust and absence, that something had shifted while I was away. I just didn't know how much. His wife's name is Renata. Known her for 8 years, since Caleb brought her home for Thanksgiving, his second year out of college. She was sharp, polished, the kind of person who knew which fork to use and always remembered details about people. Your anniversary, your sister's name, the thing you'd mentioned once about wanting to visit Portugal. I'd liked her, or I'd liked who I thought she was. What I didn't know, couldn't have known while I was in 43 days of hospital, was that in those 43 days, Renata had been very, very busy. I found out about the first thing by accident. 3 days after I got home, I went through the mail pile. There was a letter from my bank, a physical letter which already felt wrong, informing me that a joint account I hadn't been aware of had been closed. The account had been in my name and Caleb's name. It had held $42,000. I hadn't known about the account. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I called Darnell. He answered on the first ring. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Do you know any estate attorneys?" A pause. "What happened?" I told him about the letter. Just the facts, the account, the amount, the closing date, which was 11 days after I was admitted to the hospital. He was quiet for a moment. "Don't touch anything else," he said. "Don't call the bank yet. Don't confront your son yet." Another pause. "I know someone. Her name is Sylvia Marsh. She's very good. Let me call her. Darnell, Coach Hank." Again, that voice. Calm, not moving. "Let me help." The meeting with Sylvia was 3 days later. She was in her 50s, small, with sharp eyes and the kind of stillness that lawyers develop after years of hearing terrible things without flinching. I brought everything I had: bank statements, the letter, my phone with the text history with my son and daughter-in-law, a document I'd found in the house that I didn't recognize my own signature on. That last thing. That was the one that made Sylvia go very quiet. It was a power of attorney document signed, supposedly by me, 4 days after I was admitted, giving Caleb authority to make financial decisions on my behalf during my incapacitation. I had never signed that document. I had never been asked to sign that document. Sylvia set it down on the desk and folded her hands and looked at me. "Hank," she said, "I want to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Is it possible you signed this and don't remember, given your condition at the time of admission?" I thought about that honestly, the way I'd been taught to think about things honestly. "I was confused the first day," I said. "Maybe the second. By day 3, I was clear. I don't believe I signed this." "Okay," she said. "Do you believe me?" She looked at me steadily. "I believe the signature looks inconsistent with your other signatures," she said. "And I believe the timing is worth examining very carefully." She started examining it. What came out over the next 2 weeks was not a clean story. It was not a story where the villain was always obvious or the victim was always blameless. It was messier than that, and in some ways that made it harder. Renata had been managing the finances. That was the starting point. Caleb, my son, who I raised to be better than this, who sat in the back of my car for 11 years while I drove him to away games and asked him about his future. Caleb had let her, not because he was greedy exactly, because he was passive in a specific way that some people are passive. The kind where they let someone else make the decisions and then tell themselves they didn't know. He knew something was happening. He let it happen. The $42,000 from the joint account, a second account I hadn't known existed, opened in my name with Renata listed as a manager, which had received 3 transfers from June's life insurance payout, money I had never touched because I couldn't bring myself to. $40,000 from that account, moved in increments small enough not to trigger automatic alerts. And the house. There had been a conversation. Sylvia found the emails about putting the house in Caleb's name as a protective measure while I was in the hospital, in case I couldn't manage my own affairs after discharge. The email chain was between Renata and a real estate attorney she consulted without my knowledge. That one hit me differently than the money. I had bought that house with June. We had painted the kitchen ourselves. There was a mark on the door frame in the hallway where we'd measured both kids every year. That house was the last place I'd heard her voice. I sat in Sylvia's office after she told me about the emails, and I didn't say anything for a while. How much of this did my son know? I finally asked. Sylvia was careful. The emails suggest he was aware of the conversation about the house. Whether he understood the full scope of what was being done with the accounts is less clear. But he knew something. He knew something. He went home and I didn't call anyone that night. I sat in the kitchen and I made dinner, real dinner, pasta and a salad, the way June used to push me to do when I wanted to just eat cereal. And I ate it at the kitchen table and I let myself feel all of it. The betrayal. The grief underneath the betrayal. The betrayal, the specific grief of realizing that your child, the person you drove to every game, who you taught to drive a car in an empty parking lot, who you helped move into 3 different apartments, had let someone take pieces of your life while you were trying to save it. I didn't reach for a bottle. I want to say that clearly. It crossed my mind. Of course it did. And then I thought about what 43 days of hard work felt like, and I made pasta instead. 2 weeks after Sylvia started digging, she called me and said she was ready to move. She sent a formal letter to Caleb and Renata's address, copied to their respective attorneys, outlining the findings and the legal exposure involved. Forged power of attorney, unauthorized account access, fraudulent transfer of estate assets. She was precise and she was devastating, and she did it without raising her voice. I was not in the room when they read it. I was home, in the backyard, pulling up dead plants from June's garden that had been neglected since she died. Caleb called me 4 hours later. He was crying before I said anything. "Dad," he said. "Hey, son." "Dad, I didn't." He stopped. Started again. "I knew about the account. One of them. I thought it was, she said it was just organizing your finances while you were in there. I didn't ask enough questions. I know that. I know that's not good enough." I pulled a dead tomato cage out of the ground and set it aside. "The house, Caleb." He was quiet. "I didn't know about the attorney," he said. "That one. I didn't know. I found out when the letter came." His voice was unsteady. "She said she was protecting our inheritance. She said you owe her. She said some things about what you were like when they admitted you. And I listened. I shouldn't have listened without asking you. I stood there in my backyard in November holding a dead tomato cage. I thought about who I wanted to be. I need you to hear something," I said. "What happened? Sylvia is going to deal with the legal part. The money, the accounts, the POA, that's going to get handled. But what I need from you right now is not money, it's the truth. All of it. And then I need you to make different choices." Silence. "Okay," he said finally. Small word, real weight. "The house is not on the table," I said. "Your mother and I bought that house." "I know." "Okay." We talked for 40 minutes that night. It was not comfortable. It was not wrapped up clean. There were things I said that I'd had to wait a long time to say, and things he said that I'll be thinking about for years. But we talked. For the first time in a long time, we actually talked. Without Renata on the other side of the room, without the distance I'd let build up while I was drowning. Renata retained her own attorney. The legal process took 4 months. She and Caleb separated during that time. His choice eventually, though it took him too long to make it. The fraudulent POA was the centerpiece. The money was recovered, most of it. The house never changed hands. I don't know what Renata's life looks like now. I don't spend much time thinking about it. What I think about is this. I think about Darnell calling me back within an hour of a voice message I'd almost decided not to leave. I think about Sylvia's face when she sat down that document and asked me straight whether I'd signed it. I think about the moment I understood that some people circle back, not because they want something from you, but because you once handed them something they needed and they didn't forget it. I planted June's garden again in the spring. Tomatoes, basil, the climbing roses she'd always kept along the back fence. I did it badly at first. I have no instinct for plants, but I kept at it. Darnell comes for dinner about once a month. We watch whatever game's on. Sometimes he brings his wife. Sometimes he brings his kids, and they run through the house the way kids do. And sometimes I have to just stand in the doorway and breathe for a second, because the house is loud again. It sounds different loud than I remembered. It sounds like something that has continued. I go to meetings on Tuesday mornings now, at a church on Millbrook Ave, with a group of people who've been through things. I don't say much. I listen more than I used to. I've learned that there are a lot of ways for a life to go sideways, and that the ones who come back from it aren't the toughest or the smartest. They're just the ones who let someone hold the door open. Caleb calls twice a week. It's not easy between us yet. Maybe it won't be for a while, but he calls. That matters to me. And the house still smells like June's coffee in the morning, if I'm in the right room at the right time. I don't know if that's memory or something else. I stop trying to explain it. I just stay in the room until it fades. It always takes longer than I expect. Some things are supposed to take a long time. If someone let you down when you needed them most, if you've ever stood in a parking lot or a waiting room or a driveway wondering why you believe things would be different, I want you to know that what happens next is still yours, not theirs. Yours. The people who take from you when you're down are counting on you to stay there. Don't. I've had a lot of time to think about how things connect, not in a mystical way. I'm a history teacher. I think in cause and effect. Actions have consequences. Choices compound. That's not poetry. That's just what happens when you watch enough human behavior over enough years. What Renata did had a logic to it. I was down. I was away. I was the kind of person, in that moment, who looked like he might not come back. Not just from the hospital, but from any version of a functioning life. And people who take from others don't usually do it when you're strong. They wait, they calculate. They call it protecting the family, and they believe it just enough to keep going. What she didn't calculate was Darnell. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't help Darnell because I expected something back. I didn't drive him to that scholarship interview because I was building credit somewhere. I did it because he was a serious kid who deserved a real shot, and I happened to know about a door that was open. That's it. 20 years later, he was standing in a parking lot outside a hospital, and he recognized a man who needed someone to hold a door. He didn't calculate either. He just did it. That's what integrity actually looks like in practice. Not the word on a motivational poster. The thing where you do the right thing when no one's watching, and then one day, in a way you never planned, it matters. Caleb, my son. He's going to have to live with his choices for a long time. Not because I'll hold it over him, I won't, but because he will. A man who lets someone else make the wrong decisions on his behalf doesn't get to feel clean about it just because he didn't technically sign the papers. He knew enough, and he's going to have to decide, every day going forward, whether he's the person who asks the hard questions or the person who looks away because looking away is easier. I was that second person for a while. During the worst of the drinking, I looked away from everything. From the grief, from the health, from the people who needed me to still be present. And I paid for it. Not as punishment, just as consequence. That's how it works. You avoid the hard thing long enough, and eventually the hard thing comes to find you. The 43 days in that hospital were not a punishment either. They were a reckoning, the kind where you sit in a room with no distractions, and finally have the conversation with yourself you've been postponing for a year and a half. What I know now, on the other side of all of it, is this. The life you build through honest effort. The student you drove to an interview. The years you showed up to work and meant it. The marriage you tended carefully. That doesn't disappear when you fall. It waits. It shows up in a parking lot in November, wearing a dark jacket and asking if you've eaten. Resilience isn't about being unbreakable. I broke. I broke pretty completely for a while. Resilience is about what you do after the break. Whether you let someone help you up, whether you're honest about what happened, whether you choose deliberately to build something again instead of just existing in the wreckage, June's garden is growing, badly still but growing. Madly still but growing. That feels about right.